You're listening to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. Today, we'll be talking to parents about how they learned about dyslexia. They'll share their experiences with the education system and how they are working to bring about change. Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast. Today, we have a special episode featuring parents from all over the United States. We'll hear from 4 parents. One thing they have in common is that they have children with dyslexia. They are courageously sharing their stories as reading science advocates working for systemic change. Our first segment features co-founder and co-chair of CoKid, a Colorado dyslexia advocacy group, Lindsay Dracos and Amy DeBrogni. They'll share a tool that parents and educators can use to better understand the materials and approaches in schools and whether or not these align to reading science. Let's dive in. I am so excited to podcast today with 2 literacy advocates from Colorado. We have Amy and Lindsay here with us. They'll introduce themselves in just a moment. They are incredible advocates, and they developed a tool to help teachers and parents called the Literacy Dialogue Tool. So we're going to be talking a lot about that tool today and how they have worked for state-level advocacy. So welcome, Lindsay and Amy, to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So, Amy, since you are right next to me on the screen, I'm going to ask that you go first. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and how you came to become an advocate for CoKid? And, feel free to introduce yourself with your official title and anything else you want anybody to know about you who's listening.
Thanks for having us on, Lori and Melissa. My name's Amy DeBrogni, and I am a co-chair and co-founder of Colorado Kid called CoKid. And we started this work individually in our own school districts and for our own kids for many years. In fact, I have a sophomore in college and a rising junior in high school. And this journey really began for me 2 weeks into my daughter's kindergarten year, where she came home and said, "Mom, I'm stupid. I don't learn like the other kids learn." And that really began our journey on trying to learn why it is that she struggled so much to read. My son struggled so much to read, and realizing, looking back at my own husband's journey, how much he struggled to read. And I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, a group of parents came together, Lindsay and others, and realized we were all doing so much work in our individual districts, and really we needed to be advocating at the state level. And that began our CoKid work or CoKid work.
Oh, that's so cool. I love this story. There's power in everyone working together. Lindsay, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Lindsay Dracos. Like Amy said, I started advocating in my district in 2015. We moved back to the U.S. from Greece. And one of the reasons, a primary reason, was my oldest daughter was in 3rd grade and struggling in school over there. And we thought we'd have all the answers here when we dropped her off in 3rd grade. And I said to the teachers, maybe she has dyslexia. I don't know anything about that, but could you keep an eye on her and let me know what you think? And of course, their response was, oh, she's doing fine. She's bilingual. She's probably behind for that reason. She'll catch up. Another year and a half passed before we received an outside diagnosis of dyslexia. I have 3 daughters. She's the oldest. My middle daughter has a reading comprehension disorder, and my youngest has both dyslexia, reading comprehension, and several others.
Oh my gosh, you've got a full house there.
Right. And my husband too. And so I met Amy, I think in 2017, a group of us started chatting about how we could work at the state level, and really in 2018 started our advocacy.
Yeah, so you all came together and formed Co-Kid or Colorado Kid. And I think that was your state level advocacy. That was the beginning of your state level advocacy work. But what caught our attention is the literacy dialogue tool. And I'm curious if before we jump into that tool, you could frame it a little bit. How did it come to be? What was the purpose of it? When did it come into this world? Any information that you think would be important for those listening to know before we dive into this really amazing tool that is, I know you've couched it as for parents, but I also think it could be for teachers who are learning about the science of reading, and maybe even a new school leader who's walking into a school and thinking, are these books here in this book room? Like, how do I know if these materials that have been here for the past 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, are they aligned to reading science? I'm just not quite sure. So I think there's a lot of power in this tool. And I really just love the idea of a real accessible, practical way to approach this work. And that's what I feel like this tool is. So who would like to jump in and share a little bit about it?
I can do that. So this tool actually comes out of a conversation at the International Dyslexia Association's annual conference in Portland, where I had just finished listening to Dr. Julie Washington, and I was sitting down with other literacy gurus at a table and just lamenting the fact that it's so hard for parents to navigate the system without any real knowledge, and how much I desperately wish I had this knowledge and other parents had this knowledge from the very beginning, how much the trajectory of our lives would have changed. And so one of the gals at the table said, instead of trying to ask the question, who's doing it right, which is what the question was, maybe you need to help parents understand what they should be looking for. And that's really what got me thinking. I went back to Lindsay and the others in our group and said, we need something like this. And then during the pandemic, Schools Cubed reached out to our group and said, we have a little downtime right now. What can we do to support your work? And we said, we really need help putting together a dialogue tool, a way for parents to navigate the system. And that was a pandemic shutdown project that we worked pretty tirelessly on with Schools Cubed over the summer of 2020.
So I'm wondering if we can take a few minutes now to walk through this tool, because I think there's so much power in parents and teachers having something that they can literally hold in their hands as they talk to their child's teacher, as they look at materials that have been in their building for a while, or even as they're looking at materials that they might be thinking about adapting. I think this is a great tool to use in that way as well. I love that you start with the instructional time, the literacy block. What does this look like? Just simply ask the coach or the principal or the teacher to describe the literacy block. And what I thought was powerful here is there are terms that you list, such as research, evidence-based, direct or explicit instruction, decodable texts, core program, and I would even add tier 1 program. But I think what's important is that as they're describing the literacy block, you're listening for these keywords. And then those are all favorable keywords for science of reading or structured literacy. Then there are other keywords that you're looking for that are going to give you a big red flag. Those are balanced literacy, workshop model, leveled readers, shared reading, Fountas and Pinnell, Lucy Calkins, units of study, based on theme and interest, guided reading, running records, leveled literacy intervention, also known as LLI, centers Daily 5?
The second section in the document has to do with Tier 1 or core reading instruction. Some questions to ask are, how many minutes is your reading block? This is not the checklist sort of format, but just gathering information. In Colorado, we have approved curriculum. So on the Colorado version, it asks specifically, does the curriculum come from the approved list from the Department of Education? It asks about guided reading. You can ask the teacher, in your literacy block, are you using guided reading? Are you supplementing your core program with anything? These are just general questions to kind of get at what does that block look like. Again, it would refer back to the first list of, red flag terms that might come out in those questions.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Like, oh, okay, red flag if we're hearing, guided reading, and you actually put that as a little note. I love that. It says, note, red flag, not in alignment with the current research in science of reading. Awesome. I love that it's right there. I think we'll just walk through one more section. And Amy, if it's okay, would you mind walking us through the assessment questions and maybe just kind of share a little bit about this part, because it talks about a good benchmark, and thought it might be important to kind of frame it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So this assessment section is really about how do we use assessment to drive instruction. So understanding that a good quality assessment is going to help us understand where the child is struggling and give red flags to the teacher. And so this is questions to ask are, which assessment do you use in K-3? And for the Colorado version, of course, we refer back to our approved assessment list, but things to look for are DIBELS, Arcadians, and iReady is an assessment here in Colorado that's approved, but just FastBridge, iStation, AimsWeb, STAR Early Reading. We don't really chime in on the quality of these assessments, just things to listen for. And then what other assessments do you use? And we put here some that are not aligned with Reading Science or the READ Act. And those include Fontaine-Sempionnel, Benchmark Assessment System, the DRA, assessments in units of study. And our third part here is how do you assess students who are below grade level and with what frequency? Again, going back to the science and how important it is to do progress monitoring and not allow children to linger in interventions or linger in Tier 1 instruction that's not aligned to best practice.
Yeah, so it's so important. I really think it's important that you're just asking these basic questions and gathering data and then empowering the parents or the teacher to move from there. Whoever's using this.
I just think, we hope that it's a way for parents to learn the language, to be able to, to really have a participation in how their school is teaching their kids to read. I think that parents have played generally an important role in the conversation, elevating the conversation anyway about reading. And when I first started this, I knew zero. So I hope that this is a way that can help parents, step into that world. Language can sometimes be a moat between, school and home. And I hope that this is a bridge. And like you said, for schools, principals, teachers, districts, I think it's a pathway, asking all the right questions to make sure that they are going the right direction.
And I would chime in on that. Part of this is translating the educationese, as I call it. It's a separate language that parents can't access. And when you sit in IEP meetings and other things, all these acronyms are constantly flying and all these phrases. And how do you make that understandable so that you're an active participant in your child's education? And also, I definitely agree that teachers, principals are using this tool. We've heard that, and I think that's just wonderful and makes me very excited to have been part of creating something that may be useful to the community. So thank you for highlighting it.
Colorado has some really cool things going on, and I think your work is just an incredible contribution to that. So thank you both for that good work. We're super grateful, and we're really glad that you took some time to come on today to talk about this really important tool. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Our second segment features mom and advocate Lauren Taylor. She will share the story of her son's experiences in school as a dyslexic student and how she advocated for him to get what he needed. We are excited because today we are here. I am actually here today, just Melissa, with a mom. And, as a mom myself, I am so excited to talk to another mom, especially about some important topics around reading. So Lauren is here with us today. So Lauren, can you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you're here to talk about today?
So my name is Lauren Taylor. First off, I'm a mom. I'm a wife, financial analyst in corporate America.
No big deal.
No big deal. It's like, oh, that's how you know how to do this. Let's see here. Grew up in a family full of dyslexics, so I know what it's like to not only be a sibling to a dyslexic, but I also know what it's like to be like a cousin to dyslexics. I know got my child's dyslexic and dysgraphic. I literally help moms out because through my journey, I just knew that I didn't want anybody else being made to feel the way I felt. And so I took everything that I had known from watching my mom and my sister and their fight. I took that and just kind of kept going. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to help as many parents as possible. Just as a mom, I don't present myself as an advocate inside meetings or anywhere else or emails.
I guess you are an advocate, even if you don't want the title, but that's okay. We won't call you. You're just a mom.
That's what I always say.
I love, when we first talked to you, Lauren, what I loved about the beginning of your story was, your son was really young, even before he started school. And you said that you had already seen some signs, right? And to me as a teacher, that was super fascinating because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have a master's to be a reading specialist, and I don't know that I could tell you what signs to look for. So I just think it would be, if you could talk about like, what did you see? How did you know so early that there could possibly be something going on with your son?
Like I said in the introduction, so my sister's dyslexic, so there's that. But the sequence of events was my son was riddled with ear infections. Unbeknownst to us, he had an allergy to the protein in cow's milk. And so we had just essentially been feeding him his allergy. And then that created the ear infections. And so he had developed quite like in the time where he should have been learning how things sound and how to properly articulate words. He heard everything like he was in a fishbowl. So he had a very nasal tone. Because of that, my sister was starting to get spidey senses. And then my dyslexic aunt, who happens to be, I think, like 84, she and my sister were both hovering over my son at like a very early age. They were just very guarded about him. So when he turned 3 years old, I told his teacher at his preschool, I was like, I think he needs to go have a speech evaluation. So in this process, parents are 100% afforded the ability to contact the school districts directly versus going through a third party, which is what you're typically handed in a preschool environment, like you're handed a packet and then, oh, here's the information and you can mail it. And so with me being me, I've always been one of these, let's go to the top of the food chain type of people. So I just immediately went to the SPED coordinator within the district where we resided in. At that point, I went ahead and started the process. My husband was terrified. He was like, why do we have our child in this environment? There's kids over here like that are nonverbal. There are kids over here that can't hear. Like, what are you doing? It's just a speech. And I was like, It's just the initial evaluation. It's okay. My husband came from a place where they didn't really experience special education. Right. Or didn't talk about it a lot. But in our house, it had always been embedded. So it wasn't a bad word in my family.
And I'm wondering too, Lauren, for my own sake,
so sorry.
Here, because I'm assuming your son could like still hear, right? Like you said, he could hear, but it was like in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
So a lot of people might not know the connection to what can happen when he is going to learn to read, right? That it's like, oh, well, he can still hear. It's no big deal. But you saw the like what might be coming down.
Yeah, I was able that basically, it triggered immediately. I was like, if his vocabulary, and that takes us into the evaluation actually, the evaluation came back. And so vocabulary wise, he was, 3 years old coming in at 8 to 9 year old, with his vocabulary acquisition and all of that. So, it was kind of a juxtapose. They were just like, he doesn't meet the criteria, but however, because I've been through this before with my own child, I'm going to give him an IEP because you're going to need this when you get into public school. So that was another thing that tipped me off, was that she'd already tied the pieces together as well with my son. I'm like, my son is over here able to do all of these things. Yes, he's hard to understand, but he can hear. He has articulate. At the time, it was a speech impediment esque type diagnosis.
But often things we hear like that'll get better, like with time.
Yeah, no,
like,
it was never that.
Don't worry.
I didn't get that. No, I didn't get that. If anything, I was the mom that was like making the appointments. So I was at the ENT like all the time. And he had so many hearing tests, it was ridiculous because I knew that I had to make sure that I got that cleared out of the way. And then just for teachers and the audience to understand, an SLP can 100% diagnose dyslexia in a child as early as 3 years old, right? Because they are very familiar with this, but like how language ties into all of it. And so the SLP working with my child through the IEP process at like 3.5, she said, you need to go in and have his tonsils removed, his tongue tie clipped, and his adenoids removed. His tongue doesn't sit inside his mouth, so that's why he can't pronounce his words. He had a tongue tie. And so we had the tongue tie clipped, we had the adenoids removed. The tubes that were in didn't work. They backfired. They actually created a really bad scenario where all of the fluid built up and did not go anywhere. So it made things worse. So this kind of brings me into later with his other diagnoses, by the way. So with that, we got all that taken care of. And immediately he was able to be like you could hear him, you could understand him. He was just like a completely different kid. Like his tongue was able to touch the top of his mouth. Like, because I had noticed when he was younger, he had a really hard time getting his tongue to the top of his mouth to even form words, like to form sounds. We also have the benefit of having an SLP in our family. And so I was always asking her questions about it. And again, just from watching my sister and what she went through with her speech impediment at the same age, I spoke for her. And I didn't want that to be the case for my son because obviously he didn't have a sibling. But on the other side, my sister, everything was delayed because I did speak for her. So we get into this space. That was one red flag. And then the other red flags were that he knew his days of the week. He could say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But he could not tell you this. He couldn't tell you the day out of sequence. So if it was a Monday, he would say, well, we just had Saturday. We just had the weekend. And so that's like a Saturday and Sunday. So today must be a Monday. So he was literally guessing the days of the week because he didn't know that, like, if anything was out of sequence, he couldn't do it. And then there were just small things that people don't really understand. But if the kids can't do the sequence, like small things like days of the week, not being able to, he knew his ABCs, but if you threw an index card at him that was not in order, he would just freeze up, and he could not. He was like, "I don't know what letter." And I'm like, "How do you not know what letter that is? You know your alphabet, you know your letters." It goes, "Mommy, I don't know what that is."
Oh, that's it. But if you would put it, like, if you put it back in the alphabet,
if I put it back in sequence, he knew exactly what it was, and so that's how dyslexic kids go under the radar at such a young age, is because they're really good at memorization. So it's kind of been disputed now, kind of kicked to the curb, but it used to be a big theory that kids with dyslexia, their memory skills and how they're able to retain information is how they get under the radar. To me, it's more, understanding balanced literacy and level, all of that, and they're giving you a cue card and you have to guess. Yeah, that's going to make it, it kind of helps them out a little bit more. Right. But, I would ask him, I'm like, can you at least write your name? And mind you, I was at home being a good mom with the handwriting paper, doing my flashcards, doing all the things that they tell you to do with your child. Mm-hmm. He has a librarian as a grandmother. So he had a whole library of books he was read to all the time. So I can just go ahead and stomp out all those myths.
Right.
I mean, he has every book you can think of. So we had all of that going, and we get into the pre-K setting, and it's like it just flipped. Everything that he knew at home, once he got into that setting, completely went away. And he no longer knew how to write his name or like what order the letters needed to go in. He started displaying a defiant type behavior. Mm-hmm. They kept trying to pivot and say things like, "Oh, well, he needs to stay away from this person, and he needs to do this and this." To me, it was screaming, "My child's trying to communicate something to you." And I did say that in his pre-K IEP meeting, where the SLP decided that she was going to intervene on behalf of my son because I didn't know. So the SPED director came in and she was like, "You have no idea what this child is dealing with." And so she kind of went sideways for me and showed me how to fight for him. But at that point, after that meeting, her and I spoke in email, and she said, when you get, because I know you're moving, so when you get into kindergarten, you're going to have a really, really hard time. And you need to make sure you have all this paperwork. Every bit of paperwork I'm sending you, you need to take with you. They have to have it. I was like, okay, within that paperwork, my pre-K child, so this is also for teachers to understand, they were able to identify that my child's weaknesses were phonological processing, phonological awareness, written expression. He had all the red flags inside his pre-K paperwork. Mm-hmm. So that tells you that, that should let at least teachers understand that an SLP is literally our kid's best friend at an early age, because they can diagnose these things quickly, because they can tick and tie. This is the age. They may have the vocabulary, but why can't they do the output? So why can't they connect? I always say connect from their head to paper, or, like they can't get it from here to here.
We just had a speech language pathologist on, and I am like right there with you. I'm like, they are amazing.
I will go ham for an SLP inside of an IEP meeting. I'm like, like, you need to behave yourself and let this SLP talk, please.
But I think that's like so key to, everything we're talking about here. I'll just like reiterate it, of how important the hearing the sounds, right? Like for the students to be able to hear those sounds, and for your child too, to be able to make the sounds, right? He was having trouble doing that too. And like, that is going to have a huge impact when they're learning how to read. And I don't know that everybody connects that.
I was very fortunate that my son's pediatrician is extremely heavy into this endeavor. And she screens at an early age now. Back then she wasn't, but she was following it and things like that. So, wonderful. We kind of have a saying in my circle of friends that, instead of giving parents this, what to expect handbook as it pertains to like temper tantrums or like diapers. They need a whole manual on like, okay, if your kid is in school and they're doing this, then you need to do this, because there's no manual out there that tells a parent how to even initiate the process at the age of 3 years old, or even to start that process. Like you just have to know.
Right. Or to have that knowledge that you had where you're like, this defiant behavior is something, there's something under that, right? There's like, we need to question what is it he's trying to tell us through that behavior, not just manage the behavior.
Exactly. Right? Like, but yeah, that's kind of what the red flags that we found, and just for other teachers and parents to know. So always watch for, if your kids, I'm not saying that this is the cause, but this is something that I would make a red flag. But
I love that. Signs to look for.
Yeah, signs to look for. Reoccurring ear infection, meaning like from like 6 months all the way up to 3 years old. Tubes needing to be placed in and removed. Hearing tests coming back showing that they're already showing hearing loss at an early age. And then the tongue thrust like issue, or the tongue tie issue, not being able to pronounce your words properly, because essentially if you're not able to hear it right, you're not going to be able to pronounce it right. But those were early red flags. And then, like I said, the later it got, about 4 or 5 years old, we started realizing that he couldn't recognize his ABCs out of order. He didn't know his days a week out of sequence. So you want to watch for those sequence events. I mean, there's just things that I've learned now that he is almost 13 years old. And I'm like, okay, all of that's a red flag, because it all goes together. And, you know, every parent that I've helped, they're like, that's why my child could not tie their shoes. But I do have a toddler, and she's already got the pencil grip and all of and my son to this day does not have that pencil grip. She has had that pencil grip since she was like 2 years old. She has the pencil. She knows how to hold her pencil. She knows how to form her letters. She knows how, so it's kind of crazy watching what in my house we call the neurotypical kid versus the neurodivergent kid. Because I'm like, my daughter's over here mastering things I didn't know preschool kids could do, or like toddlers could do.
Right.
So that's another thing. My son didn't sing his ABCs until he was around 3.5. He didn't know the song. And then my daughter knew it too. So yeah, things like that you kind of just don't really think about. Yeah, those are red flags, is the delayed type thing.
And I think, like you said, you know, parents often hear like, well, don't stress about it. It'll come. Like, you know, and so you're like, okay, I'll wait. It'll come. But I mean, it's really, like you said, you can't diagnose it from those things, but they are really good to just like keep your eye out if you see them happening, and like,
it's like the spidey senses. If they start kicking in, go with mom gut. Mom gut's typically the best thing to go with. As you said, the wait and see approach doesn't do anybody any favors.
Right. And as a mom, I know it's hard to just wait and see. That's not where we like to be. So tell us, Lauren, about once your son got to school, you said he had an IEP already. All of these things were flagged. What happened then? Like, I mean, that kindergarten to second grade time is so crucial for learning how to read. So I know you could probably talk all day about this.
I know. I'm going to bring it down. I know. So what happened? We walked in with a diagnosis from pre-K, or from the SPED director, who was an SLP.
Was it a diagnosis of dyslexia at that point? Or?
She didn't use the word, because in IEP verbiage, they don't typically do that. But she, inside the intake paperwork, when we went into kindergarten, all the red flags were there. Phonological processing, phonological awareness, written expression, like all of those things. And then furthermore, she was expressive receptive language disorder. Like, she was pinning all of those things in there. So she was essentially building an IEP like case for him. So she had speech on there, but she was like, these are things that need to be addressed once you get into kindergarten. So we get into kindergarten, and me being a naive mom, I noticed that, like, I didn't notice all they did was give me 30 minutes of speech once a week. I wasn't happy with it. We had a meeting, a parent-teacher conference. I was not satisfied with the responses I was getting. I was like, okay, at this point in kindergarten, he should already have mastered this. What is going on? She's like, well, we have noticed that he's really hard to, like, we have to redirect him a lot. We have to, like, everything was just focusing kind of on behaviors again. Everything, like, the path was starting to go, like, lean that way again. She was like, he just really has a hard time on carpet time. He doesn't really like to listen. He doesn't like to write. And he's not mastering the sight words. It's really hard for him to even remember them. Like, in that meeting, I was like, I'm sorry, but those are all literally red flags for dyslexia. Okay, so let's set up the meeting now because I need my son screened and I want answers now because 30 minutes of speech once a week for a dyslexic kid is wholly inappropriate.
Lauren, what would you, you probably are about to, no, you're probably about to answer this, but I was just going to ask what would you hope to, like, if I was a parent in your shoes I don't even know that I would know what to ask for. Like, I would agree with you. I'd be like, this 30 minutes of speech is not enough, but I don't what do I need? What does he need? I don't know if I would know what to say what to ask for. And again, good. That's another good thing parents need to know about is that our children come into school under ESSA and they are already covered under 504, all children. Parents do need to understand that they do have procedural and parental safeguards as soon as they enter into the school setting. All schools by law are it's called child find mandate. And so they're all supposed to screen children for these things. But unfortunately, because IDEA is guidance and local control takes over at the state level, things kind of get watered down. So short answer is what you would do in the case that you're starting to notice that your child isn't like up to par and you're hearing all these buzzwords like, they can't do their sight words, they can't remember. Like, you need to, at that point, say, okay, at this time we're going to ask for the SST process to begin, and I need you to send me the parental consent to evaluate because we need to get this on the books so we can make sure that my child's supported properly. Right. So the screening is the first thing that parents want to ask for, right? Is the evaluation.
They want to ask for the parental consent to evaluate, yes.
So you had initially actually reached out to us when we had an interview around trauma, like how reading, not being able to read can cause trauma in students. And that was when we initially connected with you because you're like, that's my son, right? As this time is going by with taking so long for the IEPs, all of this is happening. He's in school every single day, not getting what he needs and struggling. And again, like what I'm hearing you say is that the behaviors become the focus, not the cause of the behaviors. I'm wondering as a parent, like, what kinds of things were you seeing in terms of like those behaviors at home too? Because I mean, but also how did you know it was connected to
communication?
I was thinking of reading, right? How did you know that this was not, he's not just a defiant child, right? But it comes back to, like, you keep saying it, like it came back to the things he needed in school that he wasn't getting. How did you know that?
At home, he was a different kid. So he went from being this kid that was extremely hungry and for knowledge. Like, he loved to learn. He loved it. He's always been like that. He went from that kid, bright-eyed, like just excited to... Right. We started seeing a pattern of, he was just getting sick for days. We started seeing, he started coming home with like bloodied like lips, and like his lips were shredded to pieces and bloodied up. His fingernails were shredded and they were just like bloody and dry blood. But at home, he just went inward. Instead of being that kid that was always so vibrant and so happy and so like wanting to draw, because drawing was his favorite thing in the world, he just retreated inward and he lived inside headphones and his iPad. And that's when I was like, I don't understand what behavior she's seeing at school, because what I'm seeing at home is that my little baby, or that my baby is not the same kid. It's like, what has happened to him? Sometimes things happen to our kids at early ages when a teacher is either defiant or does not believe that it's what's right in front of them. And I advocate, most of the moms I advocate for are either current or former teachers. So please understand that. But unfortunately, they aren't well versed in dyslexia and red flags and the mental health that comes along, or the comorbidities that come along with the diagnosis. Right. So, that's why, I do have a piece that I wrote out there a long time ago that was shared, and it's called Diagnosing Behaviors Before Dyslexia, because that's the tragedy of what happens.
Send that to us too.
I will. It is something that happens. Little boys, 9 times out of 10 are the children that, are on the receiving end of that. Little boys are quickest to be said, placed on medication. Little boys are quickest to be put on like all the things you could think that you'd never want to happen to your child happen. The statistics out there for our children are not good. I've lived those statistics. I've seen those statistics play out, still playing out to this day with my best friends who are in their 40s. Go with your gut, but the trauma is there. And just make sure you understand when you get this diagnosis, you need to make sure you're doing your due diligence on the back end with the mental health, because that's how we lose our kids the quickest. It's not the academics, it's their mental health. So
absolutely. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. I know it's a very personal story, so we thank you for sharing that with us and hope that others can learn from you. And please share all of those great resources that you mentioned so we can share with everybody. And thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Our third segment features mom and educator Erica Kaufman. She's a former balanced literacy teacher who rethought her approach to teaching reading after her child was diagnosed with dyslexia. We are here today with a very special guest. We have a literacy coach and a parent of a child with dyslexia. We know that this month of October is celebrating and bringing awareness to dyslexia. We're advocating for our students, for our children and adults with dyslexia. So we want to make sure that we are advocating for all of the things that are going to help them get what they need, as well as, Eric and I were just talking the betterment of all children. So Erica Kaufman is here with us today. Erica, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting to be here today. So thank you.
Of course. Yeah. So would you start us off just by sharing a bit about yourself? I think it's really exciting that you're both a literacy coach and a parent of a child with dyslexia, and also work in a district that is, interesting in terms of like balanced literacy and science of reading. And I know you're going to tell us a little bit about that, but they're at like a little tipping point. So that's exciting.
Yes, it's really exciting. So I just finished my first year of literacy coaching. Before that, I was an intervention specialist for a little over 10 years. And coaching is like a whirlwind experience, being outside the classroom. It's seeing so many things in a different way. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And I do feel like I learned a lot. Like there was a lot of things along the way that I was like, oh, I will like never do that again. Like going into a meeting without like chocolate or candy. Like I will never do that again. I'm always going to have like some snackies with me.
The really important things.
Yeah. So things like that along the way. I have 4 kids. We have like a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old who are going to, the 20-year-old's going to college to be a teacher. And then we have my 6 and 8-year-old. So we joke we're like a modern family, and that's like our favorite show too. So we love that and camping. And my husband is a teacher with dyslexia as well. So we kind of hit the whole gambit with everything with our family. So we always joke about that. And I just finished my series certification, and I'm a structured literacy interventionist. And I did just have my first article published in Distinct magazine, which was really great because my daughter with dyslexia was featured in it with me. So it was great to have her as part of that. And she was really excited to be part of that process and see like her artwork in the magazine. And that was a July 22 edition.
That's awesome. We'll link it in the show notes. That's exciting. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind, but a great one. And as we like chat and get going with everything, I do feel like it's important to share that I was a balanced literacy teacher. Like I had the fish lips poster and the leveled text library, and every other Friday was like my running record day. And I came from a place of that. So it's all been a learning experience and embracing the science of reading and things like that. But I just always feel it's important to share with teachers that like I did it too. And now I'm moving forward. Yeah. So it's always important to share that.
Those running records took so much time. I will never forget that. That is ingrained in my memory, doing lots of running records. And then I'll never forget as a teacher being like, and now what do I do with this stuff?
Yeah, and I had like every file folder with every level and all the things. So
totally. Erica, you had mentioned that you are transitioning from Balance of Literacy to Science of Reading. As a literacy coach, I'm wondering about the successes and the challenges you've encountered as you've worked through this shift. That's a big question.
So it is, because it's like an important one. So I look at reading as like, I even did it today. Like I woke up early to have coffee before my kids woke up. And I think I can compare like that first morning cup of coffee, like when your house is quiet, to like how teachers teach reading. Like it's like that coffee is like almost like a romantic experience. Like you love that coffee. Like I look forward to that cup of coffee every day. And that's how like teachers we take pride in our reading instruction, and it's almost like that same kind of like romantic feeling. And then to realize that, wow, like I was trained in balanced literacy. That's what I taught for years. And then to realize that maybe that wasn't the best way to do it is hard. And it like alters that cup of coffee. Then the kids like wake up and they're screaming at your house. That's a great way to, I think what's striking me is like the feeling of it all and the attachment to the way that we were teaching, because it was so ingrained in us in the way that we were taught and then went on to actually do. That's a really great like way to say it, is that it's so feeling based rather than potentially factual based. Yeah. And that's like the hardest part, I think, is because like when we're learning new things, then you see that like the faces of the kids you had in the past. Like if I would have known, I would have not taught that way. And it's hard to like, I think it's just such an emotional process to go through, going from like balanced literacy to science of reading. So that is definitely a challenge. But like teachers are always doing the best they can with the information they have. They're always making decisions with that, like to best honor the student. But it's hard when you realize that maybe that information wasn't the best that you had at the time. So I think that is like the biggest challenge in regards to moving from like balanced literacy to the science of reading. It's just that emotional piece for teachers. And I felt it too going through this. I was like, like so many sleepless nights just thinking about that.
I know. That resonates with me too, is just picturing your students' faces and thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I had known and could go back a decade ago to teach them using structured literacy, teaching with that explicit systematic instruction so that they could learn how to read and then love to learn through reading, I think is what strikes me often. So I know that you are in Ohio. Is there anything important happening in your state or anything noteworthy that we should talk about?
I like love bragging about Ohio right now. And I do want to like even brag on my district because next year or like this upcoming year, we have every single preschool to third grade teacher going through letters training. And then all of our ELA and fifth grade ELA and intervention specialists in our 4-5 building are getting letters trained too. So we had a pilot group go through and get units 1 to 4. And now our whole district of teachers from like pre-K to 3 and those 4-5 ELA teachers are getting letters trained, which is like monumental. Like I'm just so proud.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It really like I like have goosebumps as I like talk about it. So then our teachers who already did the 1 through 4 are doing 5 to 8 this upcoming school year. And it's just like, to me, that is like huge at our whole school, like elementary building will be letters trained teachers. And also in Ohio, we have our House Bill 436, which are dyslexia laws. And we just had the Ohio Dyslexia Guidebook published, which is to me, my favorite document in the whole wide world. Like I just love everything in that guidebook. And I just think everybody on that committee who wrote it is like the biggest bunch of heroes. I love them all because to me as like a parent, I'm like, those people are there for my kid. Like they wrote this big document and it's going to benefit my kid and all students. It really will benefit everybody. But I really felt like as a parent, like they have it for my kid. Like that's like, it's so exciting. So we have the guidebook and then locally, like our state support team and our ESC is amazing because they have coaching networks for literacy coaches. So I have my literacy coaching partner, Brianna, and we go to networking to like get training on coaching, and that's all science of reading focused.
That's amazing. I'm wondering, can you call out a couple of things that are in the guidebook?
Assessments.
I mean, it doesn't have to be specific. It could just be like, topics. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have assessment type. So like their guidebook has a committee that's picking out assessments as well. So that is forthcoming, that list of like approved assessments. So it's talking about that, and it has criteria. Like they can't, like the criteria really focuses on like the phonemic awareness and the word decoding as part of the list. So that's in there. MTSS framework is in there. Evidence-based practice of structured literacy, all sorts of, and tiers of intervention and support. It really lays out everything in best practice in regards to science of reading and evidence-based practice.
That's so exciting. I might have to dig into that. I know I'm working on Maryland over here, so hopefully we'll be right behind you.
Yeah. It's very exciting, the guidebook. I love it.
That's so neat. And I know you said that they just passed House Bill 436.
Yeah. So
you spoke, and your husband, right, did too?
Yeah, we did. We went to the Ohio Dyslexia Guidebook Committee, met every month as they like worked on it, and then they had parents go, or anybody really could go and speak. So my husband Jeff and I, we went in October of 2021 to kind of share our story and give them like a keep going. We love everything you're doing, and shout out as we went, and it was awesome. It was a powerful moment to be in a room of people who are all working for the same cause that you feel very passionately about, and it was awesome.
The idea that we can do something to help, that we have the solution, that we know how people learn how to read, that is what strikes me every single day, that we have the solution to this problem. We could help people avoid feeling all of those things. And so when you said like a lot of the committee members were crying, it was making me think, well, maybe they're thinking about a niece, a nephew, a daughter, a person in their life who feels, a certain way. Maybe they're anxious, maybe they're depressed, and they have maybe an inkling that it's because they are struggling to read. So when you said that, it just resonated with me that it's not just dyslexia, it is dyslexia and a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I know that this hits home for you so much, especially as a parent.
It does. And it's hard too, because when I was a teacher, I'd be like, oh, there's no way that like that math homework or that assignment could take a kid that long to do at home. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like homework cripples your whole evening. And so it impacts your whole family too. Like I shared, I have my two older stepkids. Even when we'll be doing homework, it will go from me, and then my husband will try, and then the big kids will try to help, like our whole house. And my daughter's like a sweet little girl. So it's not like she's defiant, but it's hard after a work day. And I was just recently talking to another parent this summer, and her son had ADHD, and ADHD, it had the same impact on their family at home with homework. It was just so hard. But when I was a teacher and I wasn't living that, I had a really hard time understanding it. But now, and I think it's just hard in general, if you're not living it, to have that understanding of what it feels like to have like your whole home in the evening kind of chaotic because of
disruptive
work. Disruptive because of like
for sure
schoolwork. So that's kind of hard.
And that's a really important too, that sometimes by living that experience, we gain that perspective that we need.
Mm-hmm. That was something my husband and I really like. It took us a long time, and we worked with an advocate too, because I can sit like all day at meetings at school for other kids, but when it is my kid, my brain is like mush. Like things I thought I knew, it is just like out the door. So when it comes to like dyslexia, I always ask like myself or any other teacher, like I'm think tanking with, does that child need good instruction, or do they need specially designed instruction? So at the time when we had our meetings, I just really felt that my child needed just that good, solid tier 1 instruction as opposed to specially designed instruction. So with her 504, that was something we included in was like structured literacy instruction, because I felt like that's really what she needed, not specially designed instruction. And that's kind of what based our decision. And she has been happy so far. And it's really hard too as a parent, because like your child is your like whole world. And it's like anything at school, I didn't want to change up, because would that change impact her happiness at school? And I'm so cautious with that social emotional impact to make sure that everything I plan is a priority too, that her whole self loves going to school every day. And I just don't want to do anything to alter that. And I was afraid that maybe that would as well.
That's a good point. I'm just wondering when she had that opportunity for testing, how did you know what her curriculum would be for that tier 1 opportunity? Is it because you're an educator? Is it because you're an informed parent? Like, I'm just curious.
I do think it's a little bit of, I'm an informed parent. I don't deny that, like, I am a privileged parent in this, where I am a minority. A lot of parents are pushing for an IEP, where I was kind of pushing the opposite. So that's where I was just really focusing on what's our strong tier 1. And her teacher was great. Like, I hope I don't get her in trouble for this, but on their report card, they grade for, one part of their grading is level text, like on their report card. And I talked to her teacher in the beginning of the year. I was like, yeah, that can undo all the progress by using level text. And her teacher didn't give her a level text assessment. So I was like, I was like, yes, renegade teacher. But yeah, she didn't even do that, because she knew like what we were working for all of Cora.
How did you know what curriculum they were using?
I asked. It was collaborative classroom, but the pieces of collaborative classroom that they were using was like the leveled text portions. And her teacher did show me all of what they were using, but it was also confusing, because I do know collaborative classroom has and I don't know that much about all of that curriculum, but I do know they have a component of that. So it was confusing too when the report card comes home and it's a level text report card. Even if you weren't using the level text portion of collaborative classroom, it was as a parent just confusing. Even knowing things about literacy, that was a little confusing.
Got it. So she is receiving structured, explicit, systematic instruction. Yes?
Yes. Yeah. She was in her title. Title I group, and then her teacher also changed what she was doing in her small group as well.
Okay.
And that's
how
where
many minutes
it
a day
changed.
would you say she was receiving when she was receiving that?
It said 30 minutes a day. And that was Wilson instruction. And she does have an Orton Gillingham tutor outside of school, which is like, her tutor is like the best thing in the whole world. We love her so much.
Yeah.
But she has that in the evenings as well.
Okay. And that's every day? Not every day, I assume.
No, twice a week for an hour a day. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. The part that I find I struggle so much is like, the privilege to have the tutor and then also the school after school. Like, is it really fair to be having, and I know you have to do this, and I know every parent who has to do it does it, but in our system, we are asking kids to go to school all day and then do school after school because we're not servicing them while they're at school. It's really hard. So
it
hard.
is because she wants to do gymnastics and all these activities, which I want her to put her in, but I always prioritize tutoring first. And sometimes we can't do the extra activities because we have to prioritize tutoring, which we love her tutor and she loves going, but it's like that's on top of a school day.
I'm wondering about any final pieces of advice that you'd like to leave for a literacy coach, an educator in a classroom, or a parent. And I'll let you choose if you'd like to choose one group or you'd like to leave general advice. But just like, what is one thing that you would want them to know or think about as they kind of bring this conversation to a close?
My advice, I think, would be to the parents, because it's like going on this journey as like a literacy coach. I've talked to so many more parents in like a different way because I'm going through it as a parent too. And for parents not to wait. Like if you think something is wrong with your child's reading, go get them tested, because like a school can do testing, but it's not the specific answers that you always want and need. Like I wanted to know if it was dyslexia. I wanted to know if it was ADHD, and not to wait and see if things will work out or wait for a school to test. Just go and do it. Because even for like my daughter, she knows she has dyslexia. And I think her knowing that really helps her, because it's not like she's not perseverating like I'm stupid. It's more like I have dyslexia and this is hard. So she has that better understanding. And I think that would be my biggest one. And for parents, you are not alone. Sometimes I think we go to soccer games and everyone's bragging on how good their kid is, but nobody wants to talk about like our kids do struggle. And those conversations sometimes don't come up, but you're not alone. And other parents are going through it too. And I think that's important for parents to be able to talk to each other about it.
Yeah, that's really important. And that's a great analogy. Everybody, it's easy to say all of the really good things, but the reality is that that's not life. It's like not a social media reel. And this is the real struggle, and we're all together in this. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so brave and so important. So thank you so much, Erica.
You're absolutely. Thank you again for having me here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to all of the parents who shared their stories with us in this powerful episode. We are so glad we could have these important conversations about dyslexia. If you'd like to learn more about dyslexia, head to our show notes for resources and keep listening to our October Dyslexia Awareness Series.
Thanks for listening, literacy lovers. We release a new podcast episode every Friday. Sign up to stay connected with us at literacypodcast.com.
We're excited to create a space for community discussion about our podcast. We want to connect with our listeners and support you in answering your questions. But we also realize there are a lot of other educators out there who have great advice and experience too. Let's keep learning together in our Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast Facebook group, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
If the content in this episode helped you, share with a fellow educator and teacher friend. Our literacy lover community welcomes educators at every stage of their learning journey. We're so glad you're here to learn with us.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast in this episode are not necessarily the opinions of Gray Minds PBC or its employees.